If you look around you right now, no matter where you are listening to this, I can almost guarantee we're surrounded by paper.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. Like maybe there's a stack of mail on your kitchen counter, or a paperback book sitting on your nightstand.
Or you're at the office glancing at some promotional poster on the wall.
Exactly. Or you just tossed a cardboard cereal box into the recycling bin. We live in a paper world.
We really do.
And it is so utterly ubiquitous, so commonplace, that we almost never actually see it. I mean, we see the ink on it, sure.
Yeah.
We read the words, we admire the photographs, we look at the graphic design.
But the paper itself just sort of fades into the background.
Yeah. We rarely, if ever, stop to think about the physical substrate itself. We don't think about the invisible mathematical rules, the rigorous physical laws, and the complex manufacturing standards that govern every single sheet we touch.
And we really treat paper like a passive blank canvas. But it isn't passive at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, it's an incredibly engineered product with its own rigid logic, a really long history, and a surprisingly unforgiving set of rules.
Unforgiving is definitely the word.
Yeah, because when you start looking into how paper is measured, cut, weighed, and manufactured, you realize there is a whole secret language hiding in plain sight. And if you don't speak that language, the paper will literally fight you every step of the way.
And decoding that secret language is our exact mission today. On this deep dive, we are exploring the fascinating, sometimes baffling, and always meticulously detailed world of Chapter 7 from the book Graphic Design Reference plus Specification.
It's such a great chapter.
It really is. We are going to unearth the hidden mechanics of print, from the geometry of how a sheet size is calculated to the really deceptive paradoxes of how we measure its weight.
All the way down to the microscopic alignment of its physical fibers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I promise you, by the end of this conversation, you will never look at a printed page, a business card, or even a simple envelope the same way again.
You really won't.
Oh, real quick, before we jump in, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this. And if you want to follow along with the physical copy of the book, which I highly recommend for the reference charts we're going to talk about, you could just scan the QR code on your screen right now or find the link in the description below.
Yeah, having those charts is a game changer.
Totally.
Oh.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the sheer physical footprint of paper, the geography of it.
Right, the sizing.
Because depending on where you live on this planet, the size of the paper you put into your desktop printer is governed by entirely different philosophies.
It really is a tale of two entirely different approaches to measurement. And, they reflect two very different ways of solving a mechanical problem.
So where do we start?
Let's start with North America, because it's what most of our listeners in the US and Canada interact with daily. And honestly, it is the historically stubborn of the two systems.
Stubborn is a good way to put it.
In North America, paper is measured in inches. And the absolute anchor of this entire system, the foundational unit, is the standard letter size sheet, 8.5 by 11 inches.
The classic 8.5 by 11. I mean, it's the standard notebook, the printer paper, the clipboard. It is the default setting of our professional and academic lives.
Exactly.
But why that specific size? I was looking at it, and it doesn't seem to have any clean mathematical origin.
It doesn't. It's largely a product of historical pragmatism. It comes from the physical limitations of early papermaking vats and printing presses from decades ago.
So it's just kind of an accident of history.
Pretty much. But what matters today isn't so much where the 8.5 by 11 came from, but how the entire North American commercial printing industry has completely reverse engineered itself around that specific rectangle.
Okay, how so?
Well, when paper mills manufacture large sheets of paper, these are called apparent sheets, which will eventually be cut down by commercial printers, they size them specifically to yield exact quantities of that 8.5 by 11 inch standard.
And they do that while trying to minimize waste, right?
Exactly.
So the goal is to just make giant sheets that you can chop up into neat grids of letter-sized pages. Like if I'm doing the math, an 11 by 17 inch sheet is just 2 letter pages side by side.
Right. That's a standard ledger or tabloid size.
Yeah, so you take an 11 by 17 sheet, cut it exactly in half, and you have 2 8.5 by 11 sheets. So far, the logic holds.
It does, until you get to the actual commercial presses.
Right. Because when I was looking through the source material, I noticed the parent sheet sizes for actual commercial printing presses are rarely that clean.
Oh, they almost never are.
You don't see massive sheets that are just exact multiples of 8.5 by 11. Instead, you see parent sheets listed at sizes like 23 by 35 inches or 25 by 38 inches.
Right.
Where are those extra seemingly random inches coming from?
That is where the theoretical geometry of a page crashes into the violent physical reality of a commercial printing press.
The violent reality, I love that.
It's true. In the North American system, you aren't just looking for exact multiples to cut down. You have to account for the heavy machinery putting the ink on the paper.
Okay, so the machine needs room to work.
Right. You must have slightly oversized multiples to accommodate what the industry calls on-press requirements. These larger parent sheets are designed to yield a specific number of finished pieces, say 16 letter-sized flyers, but they are intentionally manufactured with a crucial narrow margin of extra space around the perimeter.
So what you're saying is the printer is essentially buying a disposable frame around the artwork.
Yes.
Like the customer is paying for paper that is destined to be thrown away just so the machine can function.
Precisely. And that disposable frame is doing 3 vital jobs. First, bleeds.
Bleeds, like ink bleeding off the edge.
Exactly. If you want a photograph or a solid block of color to run exactly to the edge of your finished page, meaning the ink bleeds off the edge, you cannot physically print it that way.
Why not?
Because if you printed on an exact 8.5 by 11 sheet, even a microscopic vibration in the machine would leave a sliver of white, unprinted paper at the edge of your beautiful photo.
Oh, and that would look terrible.
It looks incredibly cheap. So you print the image slightly larger than the final size on an oversized sheet, and then you physically guillotine the edges off. The blade creates the perfect edge, not the printer.
That makes perfect sense. You overprint and trim the excess.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second job of that disposable frame?
Grippers. A commercial offset press is a massive, incredibly fast piece of machinery.
Right.
We are talking about pulling massive sheets of paper through heavy steel and rubber cylinders spinning at thousands of revolutions per hour. The press uses physical metal fingers, called grippers, to literally grab the leading edge of the paper and yank it through the machine.
Okay, metal fingers literally grabbing the sheet.
Yeah. And you cannot print ink where those steel metal fingers are holding the paper because the metal is physically covering the substrate.
Oh, of course.
So you need a margin of blank paper at the edge just for the machine to hold on to.
It's like holding a photograph by the very edges so you don't get your thumbprint on the picture.
Exactly like that. And the third reason is for color bars.
Color bars.
Yeah. Printers need to constantly monitor the density and alignment of the ink during a run. So the press operators print a strip of tiny colored blocks, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, along the far edge of the sheet.
And this is completely outside the final trim area.
Completely outside. They use laser scanners to read those color bars on the fly to ensure the print quality is consistent. Without that extra inch or two of paper, there's no room for the diagnostic tools.
Wow. So the North American system requires these massively varied, slightly oversized parent sheets just to print standard pages because of the physical mechanics of the press.
Yep, that's the reality of it.
It's pragmatic, sure,
Right?
but it also feels like a fossil record of whatever machines happened to be popular 50 years ago.
It really does.
Like, if I have a specific design, I have to go hunting for a specific parent sheet size that fits it, plus all these mechanical margins. Is there a better way to do this? Because this feels incredibly convoluted.
This is exactly why the rest of the world looked at the inch-based system and decided to invent something entirely different. The International Standards Organization, or ISO system?
Right, the metric system for paper.
Exactly. Outside of North America, paper sizes are metric, and the logic is not based on an arbitrary letter size and working outward. It is based on a foundational mathematical area. It is brilliantly elegant.
I read the breakdown of the ISO system in the text, and the math here is stunning. It's like a perfect mathematical fractal.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, like zooming in or zooming out always yields the exact same shape.
What's fascinating here is how that proportional scaling works. The ISO system applies to all grades of paper and paperboard, and it was divided into 5 specific series of sizes: A, RA, SR, B, and C.
Okay, let's look at the primary one, the A series.
Right. The A series is used for general printed matter, publications, and letterheads. The starting point, the absolute alpha of the system, is the A0 sheet.
Okay.
And it has an area of exactly 1 square meter.
1 square meter of paper, that's a massive sheet.
It's quite large. Its exact dimensions are 841 by 1,189 millimeters. But the absolute rule of the ISO system, the fractal magic you mentioned, is this.
Wait, let me guess. It cuts in half perfectly.
Exactly. Every single sheet in the series is exactly half the size of the next larger sheet and exactly twice the size of the next smaller sheet.
So simple.
Right, if you take that A0 sheet and fold it exactly in half across its longest side, you get the next size down, which is A1.
So the short side of the A0 becomes the long side of the A1.
Precisely. Then you cut the A1 in half and you get A2, cut A2 in half, you get A3, cut A3 in half, and you get A4.
And A4 is the famous one.
Yes. A4 is 210 by 297 millimeters, which is the international equivalent of the North American letter size. It's what you find in standard office printers in London, Tokyo, or Berlin.
The genius here isn't just that they divide in half. I mean, you can divide an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet in half too. You get 5.5 by 8.5 inches.
You can, but what happens?
The problem is the shape changes. An 8.5 by 11 is a tall, slender rectangle. If you cut it in half, you get a short, fat rectangle. The proportions totally warp.
They completely warp.
If I look at the North American system, it feels like buying clothes, where a size medium t-shirt means entirely different dimensions depending on the brand.
That's a really good point.
If I have a design on an 8.5 by 11 and I want to scale it down to that half size, my artwork doesn't fit anymore. I have to redesign the whole page. The margins are wrong, the text boxes are wrong. It's a mess.
You've hit on the exact flaw of the North American geometry and the exact triumph of the ISO system. The ISO sheets maintain a constant aspect ratio of 1 to the square root of 2.
1 to the square root of 2.
Yes, that is the only geometric ratio in the universe that allows a rectangle to be cut in half and yield two smaller rectangles with the exact same proportions.
That is incredible. So if I'm a designer working in the ISO system and I design a poster on an A4 sheet, and my client calls and says, actually, we got a bigger budget. We want to print this huge on an A1 sheet for bus shelters.
Right.
I don't have to redesign anything.
Not a single thing. You simply scale the file up mathematically. The proportions of the width to the height remain perfectly identical.
Wow.
It scales seamlessly from the microscopic A8 size, which is practically the size of a postage stamp, all the way up to a 480 sheet, which is the size of a literal billboard.
Okay, that is amazing. But wait, so the A series handles the general printing? What about the bleeds and the grippers?
Ah, right.
Because a printing press in Paris still has steel fingers and needs color bars, just like a printing press in Chicago.
Yeah.
Right? If the A series is mathematically perfect, where does the disposable frame come from?
Excellent observation. The ISO system accounts for the violent mechanics of the printing press through the RA and SRA series.
RA and SRA.
Yes. These are designated specifically as parent sheets for the commercial printer. They build in the precise tolerances for extra trims. An RA0 sheet is slightly larger than an A0 sheet, and SRA0 is slightly larger still.
Oh, I see.
So the printer buys the SRA parent sheets, runs them through the press, uses the extra margins for the grippers and bleeds, and then guillotines them down to the perfect, mathematically pure A-series sizes for the customer.
So they keep the mathematical purity for the designer, and they just isolate the messy reality of the machinery in a totally separate category of paper.
Exactly. It keeps the two worlds separate.
That is so clean. Okay, so if A is for general printing and RA is the parent sheet, what is the B series for?
The B series.
Yeah, if the A series perfectly scales infinitely, why do we need another set of sizes?
We need the B series because sometimes the geometric leap between one A size and the next is just too vast for practical human needs.
Like it jumps too much in size.
Right. The jump from an A2 to an A1 means literally doubling the area of the paper. Geometrically, a B size is designed to sit exactly halfway between two A sizes.
Okay, so it's an intermediate step.
Yes. The B series sheets are slightly narrower than the A series, so their aspect ratio feels different. They are most commonly used in the real world for things like posters, wall charts, or passports.
Passports, right.
Yeah, situations where an A4 is too small, but an A3 is just far too big.
That makes a lot of sense. It basically fills the gaps in the ladder.
Yeah.
And what about the final one, the C series?
Oh, the C series is my favorite part of the entire ISO logic. It is strictly used for folders, postcards, and most importantly, envelopes.
Envelopes.
The mathematical brilliance of the C series is that it is dimensioned to perfectly, snugly house the A series.
Ah, so an A4 piece of paper fits exactly into a C4 envelope.
Perfectly, without folding. And if you fold that A4 letter in half to make it an A5 size, it will seamlessly slide into a C5 envelope.
That is so satisfying.
It is a wonderfully systematic nesting doll approach to paper logistics. You never have to guess what envelope to buy.
Okay, so the North American system requires these massively varied parent sheets just to print standard pages, while the international system uses this flawless scaling geometry.
Right.
But that sheer variety in North America creates a nightmare for the next step, which is figuring out how much the paper actually weighs.
Oh, it really does.
Because if your parent sheets are all entirely different physical sizes, how do you create a standard measurement for weight? Like, how do you even compare them?
This is the exact problem the industry faced.
Right.
If I hand you a sheet of paper, how do you communicate to a paper mill how thick, dense, and heavy you want that paper to be?
Right.
Just like with sizing, we have two completely different global paradigms here, the International Grammage System and the North American Basis Weight System.
Let's start outside of North America again. Let's talk about grammage. Because honestly, after reading this chapter, the grammage system feels like a cool glass of water compared to the mental gymnastics required in the US.
It is incredibly straightforward, mostly because it relies on the geometry we just discussed. Outside of North America, the weight of paper is measured in grams per square meter.
Grams per square meter.
You will almost always see it abbreviated as gramism. The grammage system measures the weights of all papers universally without taking into consideration their specific grade or what they're going to be used for.
It's just an objective reality.
Exactly. It defines the theoretical sheet being weighed as exactly 1 square meter, which, if you remember, is the area of that foundational A0 sheet.
Right, the giant one.
So when a printer tells you a paper is 100 gramism, they are saying that if you took 1 square meter of that exact paper, it would weigh 100 grams on a scale.
Simple.
It doesn't matter if it's toilet paper, a wedding invitation, or a cardboard box. The term grammage is an absolute objective measure of the paper's density and mass.
It's beautiful. It's objective. 100 reism is 100 reism. A heavier number means a heavier piece of paper. Period.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's cross the ocean back to North America. Brace yourselves. How do we measure paper weight here? Because I read this section 3 times and I still felt like I was losing my mind.
I don't blame you. In North America, we use the term basis weight, sometimes called ream weight.
Ream weight.
It defines the weight in pounds of 1 ream of paper. And a ream is 500 sheets. So far, so good. We are weighing 500 sheets of paper on a scale.
Okay, 500 sheets, weight in pounds. It doesn't sound too crazy yet.
Here is the catch that breaks the entire system.
I knew there was a catch.
The 500 sheets being weighed are not the 8.5 by 11 sheets you use. They are 500 sheets cut to a given basic size.
A given basic size.
Yes, and the basic size of that theoretical sheet varies completely depending on the historical category or grade of the paper you are buying.
Wait, so to know what 50 pounds means, I first have to know what category of paper we are talking about, because the theoretical sheet they're weighing is a different physical size for every single category.
That is exactly right.
You're kidding me.
I wish I was. The basic size isn't one standard unit like the square meter in Europe. It is a completely shifting baseline.
Give me an example of this.
Let's look at the basic sizes used to determine the basis weight of some common papers. If you were talking about bond paper, the kind of stuff you use in an office copier or for standard letterhead, the basic size is 17 by 22 inches.
Okay, 17 by 22.
So when you buy a pack of standard 20-pound bond at the office supply store, it means that if you took 500 sheets of that paper cut to 17 by 22 inches, that giant stack would weigh 20 pounds.
Okay, so the baseline for office paper is a 17 by 22 inch sheet.
But if you move to a different category, say uncoated book paper, which is used inside catalogs and novels, the basic size suddenly jumps up to a massive 25 by 38 inches.
A 25 by 38.
Yep. So a 60-pound text paper means 500 sheets cut to 25 by 38 inches weighs 60 pounds.
The theoretical sheet just got significantly larger, which means 500 sheets of it should weigh more, just because there's more physical surface area being put on the scale.
Exactly. And it gets worse.
Oh no.
Let's look at cover stock. That's the heavy, rigid paper used for business cards, or the outside cover of a paperback book. Its theoretical basic size shrinks down to 20 by 26 inches.
It shrinks back down.
Right. Bristol paper, used for thick file folders, uses a basic size of 22.5 by 28.5 inches.
Okay.
And craft paper, used for shopping bags, uses a basic size of 24 by 36 inches.
I am absolutely baffled on behalf of the listener right now. This is madness.
It's very confusing.
So let me get this straight. You're telling me that a 65-pound paper could actually be entirely different in thickness, density, and actual heaviness than another 65-pound paper, simply because of the theoretical parent sheet it was supposedly cut from.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? But yes, that is the exact reality of the North American system.
That is insane.
Because of these arbitrary size variations in the foundational basic size, Paper grades that share the exact same numerical basis weight will not look or feel anything alike.
Can you give an example from the book?
The source text gives a perfect example that trips up young graphic designers all the time, comparing a sheet of 65-pound text stock and a sheet of 65-pound cover stock.
Well, they sound mathematically identical. 65 equals 65.
But remember the shifting baselines. The text stock's 65-pound weight was calculated by weighing 500 massive 25 by 38-inch sheets.
Right.
The cover stock's 65-pound weight was calculated by weighing 500 much smaller 20 by 26-inch sheets. Think about the physics there. If 500 small sheets weigh exactly the same as 500 giant sheets, what has to be true about the small sheets?
Oh, they have to be incredibly dense. They have to be super thick to make up for the lack of surface area.
Exactly.
It's like trying to communicate the weight of a slice of pizza based on whether it originally came from a 12-inch pie or an 18-inch pie.
Oh, I like that.
If someone says, hey, I ate a 1-pound slice of pizza, that number tells you absolutely nothing about the actual pizza. Was it a 1-pound slice from a small 12-inch pizza or a 1-pound slice from a giant 18-inch pizza?
Right.
Because a 1-pound slice of a small pizza would have to be incredibly thick, like a Chicago deep dish, just loaded with dense cheese and dough to hit that weight.
Exactly.
Whereas a 1-pound slice of a massive New York-style pizza might be totally thin and floppy. The number 1 pound doesn't actually tell me how thick the crust is unless I know the size of the whole pie it was cut from.
That is an absolutely phenomenal analogy. You always have to know the size of the original pie to understand the density of the slice.
Oh, confusing.
To prove how wild this gets in practice, look at some of the basis weight equivalents across different grades. A standard 16-pound bond paper, that's a very light, somewhat translucent everyday paper, is actually the exact equivalent in physical density and feel to a 40-pound text paper.
16 equals 40. That makes no logical sense unless you know the pizza pie rule.
Exactly. If we translate both of those papers to the Universal Objective International Grammage System, they are both simply 59 grammage system. The confusion entirely vanishes.
It's so much simpler.
But in North America, one is called 16 pounds and one is called 40 pounds, just because of the historical category they were sorted into a century ago.
You don't need to read the whole conversion chart, but I was looking at the math formulas the book provides to convert these ridiculous basis weights into the International Grammage Standard, and it perfectly illustrates how wildly inconsistent this is.
Oh, the conversion math is brutal.
To convert a bond paper's pound weight to the international standard, you have to multiply its weight by almost 4. I think the multiplier is 3.760.
Right.
But to convert a book paper, you only multiply it by roughly 1.5. The multipliers are completely different for every single grade of paper. It requires a designer to basically keep a translation matrix on their desk at all times.
It does, and God forbid you try to substitute a 100-pound text paper for a 100-pound cover paper on a printing press.
What happens?
The text paper will run fine, but the cover paper, which is astronomically thicker, equivalent to a 180-pound text, will likely jam the press and cause thousands of dollars in mechanical damage. You have to know what you are ordering.
Okay, so we've tackled the 2D footprint, the length and width sizing.
Yep.
We've wrestled with the absolute absurdity of how we measure its weight in pounds versus the elegant simplicity of grams.
A true wrestling match.
But as your warning about jamming the press highlights, weight isn't actually the whole story. A heavy object isn't always a physically thick object, which means we need to talk about the third dimension.
This is where paper stops being a mathematical concept and starts becoming a physical, tactile object in the real world.
Right.
Because you would naturally assume that weight and thickness are the same thing. They are strongly related, but in the world of paper engineering, they are completely distinct properties.
Okay.
The actual physical thickness of a single sheet of paper is defined as its caliper.
Caliper. Like the metal measuring tool.
Exactly. Caliper is measured with a micrometer in thousandths of an inch, and it is expressed in the industry as a point size.
Point size. Like typography.
Similar terminology, but here 1 point equals exactly 0.001 inch.
Got it. 0.0001 inch.
So if you have a heavy piece of cover stock that measures 0.0007 inches thick, that is described by the printer as a 7-point or 7P paper.
Okay.
You hear points used most often when printers are referring to rigid packaging, heavy cover stock, or thick postcards.
But who actually cares about measuring a piece of paper down to the thousandth of an inch, other than the mechanics setting up the rollers on the printing press, for a regular person?
The United States Postal Service cares very deeply.
Oh, really?
They use caliper measurements extensively to govern the entire direct mail industry. If you are designing a postcard for a massive marketing campaign, the USPS has incredibly strict minimum and maximum thickness requirements for that card.
To make sure it fits in their machines.
Exactly. For it to be processed by their high-speed automated sorting machines, and more importantly, to qualify for discounted postal rates.
Oh, the discounts.
If you design a beautiful postcard and your chosen paper is even 1/1000th of an inch too thin, if your caliper is off by a single point, the machines will literally shred it.
Shred it, just from being 1/1000th of an inch off.
Yes. Or the post office will reject the entire million-piece mailing or hit you with massive surcharges. They do not care about your basis weight in pounds. They care about the literal physical gap your paper takes up in their sorting gears.
That is a very expensive mistake to make.
Wow. So caliper is the literal objective measurement of thickness. But the text also spends a lot of time on a related concept called bulk.
Right, bulk.
How is bulk different from caliper?
Bulk is a comparative term. The term bulk is used to refer to the physical thickness of a paper relative to its weight.
Thickness relative to weight. This is where the surface finish of the paper plays a massive structural role. The way a paper is treated and finished at the paper mill will have a profound impact on its bulk.
How does the finish change the bulk?
For instance, coated papers, papers that have a slick, glossy, or matte clay finish ironed onto them, tend to be physically much thinner than uncoated papers of the exact same basis weight. They have less bulk.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let me try another analogy here. Think about cotton candy versus a solid lollipop.
Okay, cotton candy and a lollipop.
Both of them are made of sugar. In fact, they might contain the exact same amount of sugar. Their actual weight on a scale is completely identical.
Right.
But the bulk of the cotton candy, the way the sugar is spun with air and texture, makes it take up far more physical space. It's huge.
It takes up way more volume.
Exactly. The lollipop is dense, compressed, and compact. It has very low bulk. Cotton candy has very high bulk. So an uncoated paper is like the cotton candy. The fibers are fluffy, airy, and thicker.
That's perfect.
A heavily coated paper is like the lollipop. The fibers have been smashed down and filled with dense clay coating, making it thinner, even if they both weigh exactly 60 pounds on a scale.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize the mechanics of it. And that difference in bulk, the fluffiness versus the density, has massive structural implications, particularly in the publishing industry.
Why the published industry specifically?
This leads us directly to the concept of PPI, or pages per inch.
Pages per inch. If you are designing a book, this sounds like the most critical piece of math you can do.
It is the absolute bedrock of book design. Publishers use the PPI rating of its specific paper to determine exactly how thick the spine of a finished publication will be before it is ever printed.
Yeah, they have to design the cover early, right?
Think about the logistics. If you are printing a 300-page novel, you need to design a cover that wraps around the front, across the spine, and around the back. You have to send that cover art to the printer at the exact same time as the interior pages. If you don't know precisely how thick that block of 300 pages will be, your spine design is going to be wrong.
Oh, that would be a disaster.
If your PPI calculation is off, the title of the book might spill over onto the front cover, or the spine might be too wide and look baggy and cheap.
So how do you figure out the PPI if you just have a sample sheet of the paper sitting on your desk?
The manual provides a formula, and it relies on that precise caliper measurement we just talked about.
The micrometer points.
Right. To calculate the number of pages per inch, you first calculate the caliper in points of 8 pages.
8 pages.
Now remember the physical reality of a book. One physical sheet of paper equals 2 pages in a book, a front and a back.
So 8 pages is exactly 4 sheets of paper.
You take 4 sheets of your chosen paper and you measure their combined thickness with a micrometer. Then you divide that total measurement into the number 8.
Let me do the math. So if I measure 4 sheets, and together they are 0.016 inches thick, I divide 8 by 0.016, and I get 500.
Exactly. That paper has a bulk of 500 PPI. It takes exactly 500 pages of that specific cotton candy or lollipop paper to create a book block that is 1 inch thick.
And looking at the charts in the text, you realize how insanely sensitive this math is. Minor changes in the thickness of a single sheet drastically alter the physical reality of the book.
Let's look at a practical publishing scenario. Say you choose a highly compressed, low bulk paper with a caliper of 0.002 inches.
A lollipop paper.
Right. That gives you 1,000 pages per inch. If you have a 300-page book, it's going to be less than 1/3 of an inch thick.
That's tiny.
It will feel like a flimsy pamphlet.
Right.
If you are a publisher trying to sell a $25 hardcover thriller, the buyer is going to pick it up, feel how thin it is, and put it back. The author will be furious.
So you tell the printer, hey, make the book thicker, give it some presents on the shelf.
Exactly. You want to increase the perceived value, but you don't want to pay for heavier paper because that costs more to ship.
Shipping weight.
So you change the bulk. You swap to a high bulk, uncoated paper, the cotton candy paper. It weighs the exact same amount, but it has a caliper of 0.0006 inches.
Okay, what does that do to the math?
Suddenly, your PPI drops to 332. That exact same 300-page thriller is now a full inch thick.
Wow. From 1/3 of an inch to a full inch.
It feels substantial. It feels like a real novel. But if you didn't calculate that bulk change in advance, the original cover you designed for the thin pamphlet version isn't going to fit around the new 1-inch spine.
The choice of paper completely dictates the physical reality of the final object.
It completely dictates it.
It's incredible how much psychology goes into the physical gap between the pages. But up until now, we've basically been treating paper as an isotropic solid.
Like it's just plastic.
Right. Like a sheet of plastic or metal that behaves the same in every direction. But paper isn't plastic. It's a woven mat of biological material.
It really is.
It's literally mashed up trees.
Mm-hmm.
And how those tree fibers dry and align changes how the paper behaves in our hands. Let's talk about the texture and the tear. Let's talk about finishes and grain.
This is where paper truly becomes a tactile, living medium. The manufacturing process imparts physical characteristics that you simply cannot ignore.
Right.
Let's start with the surface finish, which we touched on with the bulk analogy. In addition to basis weight and caliper, paper comes in a vast array of finishes, ranging from deeply textured to perfectly smooth.
The text divides these into uncoated and coated finishes, right?
Yes. Let's start with uncoated.
Let's do that, because I always assumed paper was just naturally flat, but these textures are actually engineered into it, right?
They are entirely engineered. Uncoated papers come in an assortment of finishes that are actually embossed into the paper while it is still wet and drying at the mill.
Embossed while it's wet?
Yeah, they use special pattern rollers to press a physical texture into the fibers before they set. The source mentions a few classic textures that have been used for centuries. Well, there is a linen finish, which mimics the woven, crisscrossing texture of actual linen cloth.
I've felt that one. It's very nice.
There is a laid finish, which has distinct ribbed lines running horizontally and vertically. That one is designed to mimic the look of ancient pre-industrial handmade paper that was dried on wire screens.
Oh, that makes sense.
And there is a cockle finish, which has a subtle, irregular, wavy, almost crinkled feel to it.
Cockle. I don't know if I've ever heard of that one.
It's very distinctive. These uncoated finishes are all about creating a tactile, organic, expensive feel.
I always love a good linen texture on a fancy restaurant menu or a high-end law firm's letterhead. It just feels authoritative.
It really does.
But what about coated papers? How do they get their finish? Because they don't feel textured at all. They feel like polished stone.
Coated papers achieve their finish through an entirely different mechanical process called calendaring.
Calendaring.
Yes. Calendaring does not emboss a pattern. It flattens the paper. It involves passing the dried paper through heavy, highly polished metal rollers under intense heat and pressure to literally iron it out and polish the surface.
Oh, so it crushes the cotton candy down.
Exactly. Coated papers are available in several stages of this process. There is uncalendared, which is just the coated surface without the heavy polishing. It's relatively rough. Then there is machine calendared, which creates a smoother, more standard finish used in most magazines.
Right.
And finally, there is super calendared, which runs the paper through multiple sets of alternating steel and fiber rollers to create a very smooth, highly refined, dense surface.
And these pressure processes dictate the final look of the coating.
Yes. Depending on the chemical formula of the clay coating and the intensity of the calendaring, the finish can range from a soft matte or dull coat finish, which diffuses light and is great for reading large blocks of text because it reduces glare.
Oh, that's why some art books use matte paper.
Exactly. All the way up to a high gloss sheen, or even a cast-coated stock, which is almost mirror-like in its glossiness.
Cast-coated?
Yeah, and that is used for high-end photography, where you want the ink to sit perfectly on top of the surface rather than soaking in.
Okay, so the finish dictates the surface. But underneath that surface, The very internal structure of the paper has a hidden architecture. It is highly directional. This is the concept of grain.
Grain is so crucial.
I think this might be the most practical physical detail in the entire chapter because it's the one that most often ruins a finished product. What exactly is paper grain?
Grain refers to the physical microscopic alignment of the cellulose wood fibers within a given sheet of paper.
How does that happen?
Paper is manufactured continuously on massive, high-speed machines that can be 100 yards long. Liquid pulp, which is 99% water and 1% wood fiber, is sprayed onto a rapidly moving wire mesh.
Okay, so it's mostly water at first.
Right. And as the water drains away and the pulp begins to dry, the sheer speed and forward momentum of the machine forces the majority of the tiny wood fibers to align themselves parallel to the direction the machine is moving.
So they all point the same way.
They all point the same way, parallel to the edge of the massive, continuous roll being created.
It's like logs floating down a fast-moving river. They all naturally turn to point downstream, parallel to the riverbanks.
Exactly. And when smaller sheets are eventually cut from those massive rolls by the commercial printer, that microscopic directional alignment remains permanently locked into the paper.
So you can't undo it.
Nope. If the fibers happen to run parallel to the length, the longest side of the cut sheet, the stock is described as grain long.
Grain long, got it.
If the fibers run parallel to the width, the shorter side of the sheet, the stock is grain short.
But why does this invisible alignment matter so much once the paper is sitting on my desk? I mean, if I have an 8.5 by 11 sheet, it looks the same no matter which way the invisible fibers are pointing.
It looks the same, but it behaves entirely differently. The grain direction fundamentally dictates the mechanical strength, the folding accuracy, and the stiffness of the paper.
The folding accuracy.
Yes, paper will always tear and fold much more easily and much more cleanly when it is folded with the direction of the grain.
Because they're already lined up that way.
Right. When you fold with the grain, you are simply creating a crease between the parallel fibers. The fibers just roll out of the way. But if you try to fold a heavy paper against the grain, you are forcing thousands of microscopic, rigid wood fibers to physically snap and break in half.
And that causes very visible, very expensive problems, right?
Ruinous problems. Folding heavy paper against the grain results in a rough, uneven, jagged fold. The paper literally bursts open.
Yikes.
If you have a beautiful, dark photograph printed across that fold line, the ink will crack and flake off along the break, revealing the ragged white paper fibers underneath.
Oh man, that sounds awful.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a stunning, incredibly expensive piece of graphic design can be completely ruined at the very last second in the bindery if a brochure is scored and folded against the grain.
It's just like petting a dog or brushing your hair. If you stroke a dog with the grain of its fur, everything is smooth, natural, and lays flat.
Exactly.
But if you try to pet a dog backwards against the grain of the fur, it stands up, it resists, it creates friction, and it looks like a messy disaster. You are fighting the natural architecture of the material.
That is a very visceral, accurate way to remember it. You never want to pet the paper backwards.
Never pet the paper backwards.
And the grain affects stiffness, too, which is crucial for structural items. The text gives a great rule of thumb for designing business cards.
Oh, I love this part.
If you hold a business card and flick the edge, you want it to have a satisfying snap. You want it to feel rigid and professional.
Right.
The rule is, business cards that are cut so that the length of the card runs in the direction of the grain will tend to feel flimsier.
Because it's bending between the fibers.
Exactly. They bend easily along that long axis because there is no structural resistance. But cards cut with their length against the grain will feel much stiffer and more substantial because when you try to bend them, you are pushing against the structural strength of all those tiny wooden logs.
I am literally going to go test every business card in my wallet after we finish recording.
You'll be able to tell immediately.
So, how does a designer control this? Do you just cross your fingers and hope the printer cuts it the right way?
It requires absolute communication with the printer before the job ever begins. Grain direction can also drastically affect printing stability on the press itself.
On the press, too.
Yes. Long grain sheets are generally preferred for multicolored print jobs because they remain more dimensionally stable. They don't stretch as much as they pass through the various wet ink rollers.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, as we discussed earlier with parent sheet sizes, the physical size constraints of the printing press and the need to maximize the number of pieces you can cut from a sheet might sometimes force the printer to use short-grained paper.
Oh, so they have to compromise.
Yes. The manual explicitly warns that it's best to check with your printer to determine the best way to set up your document for optimum grain direction before you finalize your files. You have to design around the grain.
Which brings us perfectly to the final major theme of this chapter. We've talked about the hidden mathematics of sizing, the paradoxical physics of weight, the three-dimensional reality of bulk, and the biological architecture of grain.
It's a lot of engineering.
It is, and all of this engineering must be incredibly expensive. Now, we have to talk about the economics. Let's talk about yield. When you're a company buying massive quantities of parent sheets to print 50,000 brochures, how do you ensure you aren't just throwing money and paper into the recycling bin?
This is the strategic, high-stakes side of graphic design, getting the most from a sheet. Minimizing wasted paper involves understanding exactly how many trimmed pages will fit onto one of those standard, historically stubborn North American parent sheets we discussed at the beginning.
Right.
The book provides a detailed yield chart to help designers determine how many pieces they can mathematically extract from parent sheets.
It's like playing Tetris. But if you leave a gap at the top of the screen, it costs your client $10,000. The environmental and cost impacts of a tiny design choice are massive here.
Absolutely massive. Designing an oddly sized brochure that doesn't fit cleanly into these historical parent sheets might mean you can only fit 3 pieces on a parent sheet instead of 4.
Just because it's a little bit too wide.
Exactly. By adding 1/4 of an inch to your design for purely aesthetic reasons, you might instantly drive up the cost of the paper by 25% because you are forcing the printer to throw away huge strips of blank paper.
Trying to do this math in your head, calculating bleeds, grippers, and grain direction across various parent sheets is an absolute nightmare. This is exactly why I mentioned at the top of the show, well, I'm mentioning it now, if you are actually a designer trying to do this high-stakes Tetris, you need the physical reference charts in Chapter 7.
You really do.
We're putting a QR code on the screen right now and a link in the description below. Please subscribe to the channel while you're at it. But seriously, if you work in print, get the physical book for these yield tables. You cannot memorize this.
The yield charts are indispensable, but the yield chart only tells you how many pieces fit on one sheet. Once you figure that out, you have to calculate how much total paper to actually order from the mill.
Right.
That is where the paper estimator chart comes in.
Let's walk through how this works because it highlights another hidden reality of the printing industry: failure.
It's a mathematical grid. Let's say you consult the yield chart and figure out that your brilliant design will allow you to cut exactly 16 finished pieces out of a single parent sheet.
Okay, 16 out of a sheet.
You go to the paper estimator chart. You find the number 16 in the left-hand column. Then you read across the top column to find your total press run, how many copies you actually want to hand to the client.
So say I want 3,000 copies.
Let's say you want to print 3,000 brochures. You follow the row for 16 out across to the column for 3,000. The number in that box is 188. That means the absolute mathematical minimum you need is 188 parent sheets of paper to yield 3,000 finished pieces.
188 sheets. That seems incredibly precise. But the text adds a massive flashing warning light here. Crucially, this number does not account for spoilage.
Spoilage is the brutal reality of manufacturing. You cannot buy exactly 188 sheets. A printing press is a massive analog machine.
Right.
When you turn it on, it doesn't just print perfectly on the first sheet. The ink keys have to be calibrated, the water balance has to be adjusted, the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black plates have to be microscopically aligned so the image isn't blurry.
Which is called registration, right?
Yes, a process called registration.
Yeah.
It takes time and paper for the machine to warm up and dial in the colors.
So the printer is literally running hundreds of sheets of paper through the machine and throwing them directly into the trash just to get the machine calibrated.
Yes, that is spoilage. Pages get jammed. Bindery machines make mistakes during the folding and stapling process. All of that requires extra paper.
Not much extra paper.
Spoilage percentages are determined by individual printers, depending on the length and complexity of the press run. If it's a simple black and white job, spoilage might be low.
Okay.
But if it's a complex 6-color job with heavy ink coverage and complicated folding, you might need 10%, 20%, or even 30% extra paper just to guarantee you get your 3,000 good copies at the end.
So what does this all mean? We've covered the math, the shifting weights, the physical thickness, the biological grain, and the high-stakes economics of yield and spoilage.
We have covered a lot.
To wrap this all together, the chapter ends with a paper usage guide. It synthesizes everything we've talked about into a practical cheat sheet. And reading through it, I realized you can't just pick a paper because it looks pretty. You have to match the physical engineering of the paper to the mechanical demands of the final product.
It's exactly like casting actors for a movie. You have all these different paper types, and they all have specific mechanical strengths, weaknesses, and traditional roles based on their bulk, their finishes, and their basis weights.
Exactly. You wouldn't cast a lightweight disposable newsprint to play the durable, heavy-lifting role of a pocket folder. That requires a thick cover or Bristol stock that won't tear when you shove documents into it.
Right.
Just as you wouldn't use an expensive specialty translucent vellum to print a disposable daily tabloid. Let's review this casting list and connect the end use back to the physics we just learned. Let's start with the working class background actor, bond paper.
Bond paper is usually a 16, 20, or 24-pound basis weight. It comes in smooth or cockle finishes.
What's it used for mostly?
Its primary uses are flyers, office forms, photocopies, and newsletters. But think about why it is used for those things. Bond paper has a very specific caliper and low bulk that allows it to pass through the automated friction feed rollers of a Xerox machine without jamming.
Oh, because it's thin enough.
Yes, its grain is aligned so that it can be easily folded into thirds to fit perfectly into a standard business envelope. You couldn't use a high-bulk, fluffy, uncoated book paper in a copier, even if it weighed the same, because the physical thickness would clog the gears.
That makes perfect sense. The machine dictates the paper. Then we have writing paper. Slightly heavier, usually 24 or 28 pound.
Yes, writing paper.
It comes in nice embossed finishes like linen and laid, often with matching envelopes. It's cast for corporate stationery and high-end letterheads. It exists specifically to take the ink of a fountain pen without bleeding and to feel substantial and authoritative when a client holds it.
Exactly.
Moving up in weight, we hit the heavy lifters of the publishing world, book and text papers.
Uncoated book ranges from 30 all the way to 80 pound. It is engineered to be physically thicker and more opaque than bond paper.
Why is opacity so important here?
That opacity is critical. It makes it perfect for the inside pages of thick novels, direct mail, and catalogs, where you absolutely do not want the dark text from the backside of the page showing through and making the front unreadable.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Tissue paper is similar, ranging from 60 to 100 pounds, often in a wider variety of colors and textures. It's used for annual reports, posters, and higher-end brochures where you want a tactile experience.
And if you want to print high-resolution photographs, you move to coated book paper, ranging from 40 to 100 pounds.
Right, the coated stuff.
With its dull gloss or cast-coated calendared finishes, this is the star of the show for magazines and high-end art catalogs. The clay coating prevents the wet ink from soaking into the fibers, allowing the dots of ink to sit sharply on the surface, creating vibrant, crisp images.
Exactly.
What about the heavy hitters? The character actors with real structural presence.
That brings us to cover stock. Ranging from a sturdy 60-pound up to a massive 130-pound weight. It comes in every finish imaginable.
And what's its main job?
It is the heavier, durable counterpart designed to structurally protect the lighter text pages inside. It is engineered for stiffness. It's used for business cards, annual report covers, menus, tickets, and pocket folders. It is meant to survive being handled repeatedly.
Makes sense.
Even heavier is index or Bristol stock, ranging from 67 up to 175 pound. This is pure utilitarian strength. It is used for file folders, index cards, heavy boxes, and clothing tags, things that need to endure actual physical abuse.
And the guide rounds out with a few specialty players. Things like translucent vellum, a semi-transparent stock used for elegant fly sheets, overlays and architectural presentations, or see-through envelopes for high-end wedding invitations.
Very fancy.
Then there's newsprint, a very inexpensive, lightweight, high-bulk paper used exclusively for newspapers and tabloids. Its main physical property is that it is cheap to produce and absorbs cheap ink instantly, so it can be printed at terrifying speeds.
Terrifying speeds is right.
And finally, craft paper. It is strong, durable, usually brown or manila, and its primary job is making bags and tough envelopes that won't burst in the mail. Every single grade, every single weight, every finish has a specific purpose, a specific basic size, a specific bulk, and a specific grain.
It really is an invisible architecture. We walk through a world built of paper, completely oblivious to the staggering level of granular engineering and historical compromise that dictates every single sheet.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a breath and look back at the immense journey we just took. We started by navigating the fundamental geographic divide between the pragmatic, historically messy inch-based North American sizing system and the beautifully elegant, mathematically perfect fractal scaling of the international ISO standards.
A huge difference.
We untangled the absolute absurdity of measuring paper weight, contrasting the universal objective reality of grammage against the baffling shifting baselines of North American basis weights, where we learned that you always have to know the size of the pizza pie before you can understand the weight of the slice.
We dug into the physical third dimension, exploring caliper, the illusion of bulk, the cotton candy versus the lollipop, and the crucial formula for calculating pages per inch, which completely dictates the physical reality and perceived value of a published book.
We felt the texture of embossed, uncoated finishes and the ironed-out smoothness of calendar's coatings. We learned the biological, mechanical necessity of respecting the paper's grain, why petting the paper fibers the right way means the difference between a crisp, professional fold and a ruined, cracking disaster.
Never pet the dog backwards.
Exactly. And finally, we looked at the high-stakes Tetris of parent sheet yields and the reality of machine spoilage, learning how to match the exact right paper grade to the mechanical demands of the job to minimize environmental waste and control costs. It has been incredibly eye-opening. I will certainly never look at a piece of junk mail the same way again.
It really changes your perspective. And as we leave this topic, I'd like to offer a final lingering thought.
Okay, what is it?
We've spent this entire deep dive looking at how we manipulate paper, how we cut it, how we fold it, how we calculate its bulk, and how we force it to fit our human needs for books, posters, and direct mail. We act as though we are the masters of the material. But consider the reverse.
What do you mean?
Think about how much of human communication, behavior, and physical infrastructure has been invisibly shaped by these strict, unyielding mathematical standards over the last few centuries.
Like what?
Think about the standard length of our essays in school. Think about the exact physical dimensions of our briefcases, our backpacks, and our metal filing cabinets.
Wow.
Think about the brevity of our letters, the size of our clipboards, the design of our mailboxes, and the slots in our desktop printers. All of these human inventions, these daily realities of our lives, have been built to conform to the arbitrary dimensions of the 8.5 by 11 sheet, or the A4 sheet.
That's entirely true.
And those sheets were themselves dictated by the physical iron limits of early parent sheets and printing press cylinders. We build our world to fit the paper. So the question is, have we been shaping the paper all this time, or has the paper been shaping us?
Wow, that is going to stick with me. The invisible architecture shaping not just our documents, but our thoughts and our physical spaces. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into Chapter 7 of the Graphic Design Reference Plus Specification Manual. Keep looking closely at the everyday objects around you, keep questioning the historical standards we take for granted, and remember to check that grain direction before you fold. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.